Shanghai took a cigarette out of the box, put it in his mouth, and while he was lighting it up, Director Bai approached them, extended his hand, and explained that in the nightmare trial, Lu Fan would not only encounter a boss, but also its attributes would increase dramatically. Kang Shong turned his head towards Director Bai and with a serious look, simply stayed silent without interrupting. While Shanghai was holding the cigarette in his hand, he turned his head towards them, exhaled the smoke from his lungs, and with a smile asked them to look at Lu Fan. At the same time in the nightmare trial, Lu Fan unsheathed the dagger and, gaining momentum, took a big leap. In front of him appeared a dinosaur-shaped monster that was trying to attack him by surprise. But to its bad luck, Lu Fan was already aware that he couldn't let his guard down in a place like this. Just before it could make a move, Lu Fan cut the poor monster into pieces with the precision of a surgeon, without giving it a chance to react. After finishing off the monster, Lu Fan landed on the ground, letting Shanghai and the others know that he didn't need to be thinking about things like X+1. Xiao Yi appeared and using her sharp teeth, she grabbed the lifeless head of the monster with her mouth. At that moment, several system windows appeared. Now that the monster had been defeated, the level 70 of the nightmare trial had been successfully cleared. As a result, Lu Fan's level increased to 17 and his dragon pet's level increased to 18. While Lu Fan's eyes were emitting flames, he began to look sideways, and there was no doubt in his mind that after floor 50, the Celestial Tower was designed to become increasingly difficult. However, with the World Destroyer, Xiao Yi by his side, this trial was not going to pose any problem for him. Lu Fan decided to continue leveling up, so he started walking. While holding the dagger in one hand, he began wiping his mouth with the other and with a smile, gave Xiao Yi the order to follow him. Using her sharp teeth, she split the monster's neck in two and began to roar to indicate to Lu Fan that she had understood. At the same time, in the surveillance room, the Director Bai, who had his arms behind his back and was observing Lu Fan, explained to the director of First Middle School that only about 10 minutes had passed and Lu Fan had already reached the floor 70 of the nightmare trial, the most difficult trial of all. The director of the First Middle School, who was sitting with his arms crossed, closed his eyes and explained to him that this year's trials of the Celestial Tower were more difficult compared to previous years. He opened one of his eyes and began to glance at the screen, and then he explained to the Director Bai that he really doubted that anyone would be able to surpass the 80th floor of the tower this year. He had spoken too soon, as Lu Fan arrived on the 76th floor. Upon seeing that Lu Fan was cleaning the floors of the tower without much difficulty, the director of First Middle School realized that he had been simplistic in his thinking. At the same time, Xiao Yi and Lu Fan reached the 76th floor of Nightmare Trial, where several elk-shaped monsters appeared and tried to attack them. However, it was in vain as Xiao Yi started spitting fire and eliminated them effortlessly, thus successfully clearing the 76th floor. Once they reached the next floor, a giant carnivorous worm with thousands of teeth emerged from the ground, opened its gigantic mouth, and began to roar. As it slowly approached, Lu Fan simply stood still. Then, he extended both hands towards it, causing flames to appear. He began to stare at the monster with a murderous look and summoned Xiao Yi. Lu Fan unleashed a powerful flame towards the worm, splitting its body in half. In an instant, she appeared out of nowhere and using her sharp claw, she ripped off its head. While holding onto its head, she began to stare at it intently and roar. Now that the monster was dead, the level 83 of the Nightmare Trial was cleared. As a result, Xiao Yi the Dragoness leveled up to 14 and Lu Fan leveled up to 19. Director Bai turned his back to the screen, put his hands behind his back, and as he was approaching Shanghai, he revealed to everyone that in previous years many geniuses had been constantly striving to reach the highest floor of the tower. As a result, all they had achieved was exhausting their strength and losing their lives. Shanghai put the cigarette in his mouth, put his hand in his pocket, closed his eyes and asked the director to reflect on it since Lu Fan was on the 80th floor, which meant that he only needed to clean a couple more floors to obtain the final reward of the grand exam. He knew that the director wanted Lu Fan to come back. He questioned him if he really believed that someone like Lu Fan would give up so easily. Director Bai reached out towards the leaderboard. Lu Fan was in first place with 6.5 million points, far surpassing the others. Director Bai told Shanghai and the others that he wasn't trying to bring Lu Fan back, but quite the opposite. He wanted him to continue challenging the Celestial Tower since it was very likely that he would be the only candidate in the last 10 who would be able to surpass the 100th floor. The director of the First Middle School, who was sitting with his arms crossed, opened one eye and while glancing at the screen, asked Director Bai to wait a moment. Although the bosses on each floor were not as powerful as the bosses of the secret dungeons, they couldn't forget that the difficulty of the 99th floor was very high. At that moment, a teacher sitting next to him caught everyone's attention. He began pointing at the screen and asked everyone to look because Lu Fan had reached the 99th floor. Upon hearing this, the director of the first middle school opened his eyes, and upon seeing that Lu Fan had indeed reached the 99th floor, he was shocked and began to wonder how this was possible. The 99th floor of the nightmare trial was a castle. While holding the dagger with one hand, Lu Fan put his other hand in his pants pocket and started walking down the hallway. Several seconds later, he reached the end of the hallway. In front of him were some stairs leading up to a throne, next to which stood several armed knights. As he approached a little closer, he saw that they were not knights but simply suits of armor. At that moment, the candles lit up by magic, and soon a strong wind began to blow towards the direction where the armors were. Lu Fan simply stood still and started staring at the armors, knowing that something bad was about to happen. At that moment, blue flames appeared on the armors, causing them to slowly come to life. A status window about these monsters appeared. They were the level 55 headless horsemen of the apocalypse. Each of the lifeless knights had a unique ability. The spear knight had the skill called thrusts. This skill allowed the knight to throw between 4 to 8 thrusts. If one of the attacks hit the target, then the thrust effect would be added, inflicting an additional damage of 400%. The knight with the sword had a skill called counterattack. When it received damage, it could activate a powerful counterattack. The knight with 2 swords had a skill called Thunder. This ability allowed it to activate the power of thunder, increasing its attack speed and granting additional damage. The knight with the giant axe had a skill called Execution. If its health was below 75%, it could attack the target and kill it in one blow. The last skill was a joint skill called Knight's Oath. This skill allowed the knights to merge their health points and defense, increasing them by 400%. Lu Fan unsheathed his dagger, extended his hand towards the monsters, assumed an offensive stance, and with a serious look he remembered that the headless horsemen of the apocalypse came from a very famous secret dungeon. All secret dungeons had originated in the real world, a clear example being the Kingdom of Destruction, which was created as a result of the invasion of the undead army hundreds of years ago, where the king was killed. The knight wielding the axe used the skill Execution and struck the ground with force, breaking it into pieces. Lu Fan began to cover his face with his arm and thought about the knight's ability called Knight's Oath, which allowed them to merge their HP points. He decided that the safest method to defeat these monsters was to distract them and attack them one by one. He gathered momentum and started moving quickly towards the monsters. Since he didn't possess any distraction skills, he could only confront them in one way. Gaining momentum, Lu Fan took a big leap and decided to fight against the 4 together, taking advantage of being in the air. The Spear Knight used the skill Thrust and began attacking Lu Fan with a series of thrusts. But Lu Fan effortlessly blocked the attacks using his dagger. At that moment, one of the knights let down their guard. It didn't take long for Lu Fan to notice this, and without wasting a second, he attacked the knight, cutting its body in half. Several seconds later, thanks to the power of blue flames, the knight's body rejoined. Lu Fan turned his head back, and upon seeing that the knight's body had reassembled itself, he realized that he couldn't defeat them using only his dagger. The knight that Lu Fan had attacked was the knight who wielded a sword, and it possessed the ability to counterattack. Now that the conditions of the ability had been fulfilled, it stood up and prepared to counterattack Lu Fan with a powerful strike. Upon realizing this, Lu Fan's expression changed drastically as he knew he was in danger. The knight attacked Lu Fan, but he reacted in time and effortlessly blocked the attack using his dagger. While he was blocking the knight's attack, he gave Xiaoyi the order to attack. At that moment, she appeared and struck the knights with great force, shattering the floor in pieces in the process. Before her attack could land, Lu Fan gained momentum, leaped, and moved away from the area. Then, she attacked the knights by unleashing a powerful flame, destroying part of the castle into pieces and creating a curtain of smoke in the process. Several seconds later, as the smoke began to dissipate, Lu Fan praised Xiaoyi for doing a good job. While she had her hand resting on the castle wall, she turned her head towards where the knights were and started roaring. At that moment, the knight wielding 2 swords emerged from the rubble and activated the Thunder ability, which allowed it to increase its attack speed and add additional thunder damage. The knight extended its swords to the sides and began shouting. In the blink of an eye, it appeared next to Lu Fan and attacked him. But using the dagger, Lu Fan blocked the attack. While he was distracted blocking the knight's attack, the 3 knights emerged from the rubble and, gaining momentum, took a big leap and began to advance quickly towards him. The knight with the giant axe attacked Lu Fan, but he took a big leap and dodged the attack at the last second, causing its axe to hit the ground. While he was in the air, he started looking at the knights and decided not to waste any more time as he had to reach the 100th floor as quickly as possible. With a serious look, he extended his hand towards the knights and ordered Xiaoyi to prepare for an attack. Upon hearing the order, she appeared behind him, opened her mouth, and began summoning a large fireball. She was using the skill called Lava Flame, which allowed her to continuously shoot flames forward, causing damage and healing herself at the same time. Xiaoyi launched the fireball towards the knights, destroying the castle into pieces. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.